The first thing Rebecca Armstrong noticed when she walked into her own bedroom was the unfamiliar perfume. It hung in the air like an accusation, floral with a musky undertone. Nothing like the unscented products she'd switched to during chemo. The second thing she noticed was that the sheets had been changed. Hospital corners tucked with military precision. Nothing like Mark's usual haphazard attempts. Her fingers trembled as she touched the bedspread. She'd come home early from her sister's, where she'd been recovering because she'd missed her husband. Missed her home. For 6 months, cancer had stolen everything from her energy, her hair, parts of her body, but it hadn't occurred to her that it might steal her marriage, too. The third thing she noticed was the long blonde hair on her pillow. Rebecca hadn't had hair in months. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Mark texting that he was stuck at the office. Again. Rebecca's chest tightened, the familiar pre-scan anxiety returning, but this time it wasn't fear of cancer spreading. It was something else entirely. She went to the kitchen for water, trying to calm her racing heart, when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a key in the front door lock. Rebecca froze, glass midway to her lips, but it wasn't Mark who walked in. It was a tall blonde woman who stopped dead when she saw Rebecca, her perfect mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. "Who the hell are you?" Rebecca asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the roaring in her ears. The woman clutched her designer purse tighter. "I'm Vanessa, Mark's colleague." She held up a key, Rebecca's house key, with the little blue rubber identifier she'd added after her first chemo session when her memory started getting foggy. "He said you were staying at your sister's until next week." Rebecca's entire body went cold, then hot, then completely, perfectly calm. "Get out of my house," she said quietly, already reaching for her phone. "I'm calling the police. 6 months earlier." "It's most likely nothing," Dr. Chen said with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd delivered both death sentences and reprieves. "But we should do a biopsy to be sure." Rebecca nodded, aware of Mark's hand squeezing hers too tightly. He'd always been a worst-case scenario person, while she prided herself on pragmatism. 15 years of marriage had balanced them. "It'll be fine," she whispered to him later in the car. "My mother had a benign lump at my age, too." Mark kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Of course it will," he said, but his voice held a tremor that made Rebecca's stomach clench. It wasn't fine. Stage IIB breast cancer, aggressive, treatment plan, surgery, followed by chemo, then radiation. Rebecca took notes during every appointment while Mark sat beside her, increasingly distant, as if the diagnosis had placed her on a shore he couldn't reach. "I'll beat this," she told him the night after diagnosis. Lying in their bed, the sheets still smelling of the lavender detergent she loved. "We'll beat this." Mark nodded, but his eyes were focused on something beyond their bedroom window. "I know, I'm not good with sickness." "You know that." She did know. When his mother had been dying of pancreatic cancer, he'd visited once a month instead of once a week like his siblings. He'd explained it away as work demands, but Rebecca had seen the relief in his eyes when they left the hospice each time. "This isn't the same," she said firmly. "I'm not dying. I'm fighting." He smiled then, the smile that had made her fall in love with him. Slightly crooked, boyishly charming. "You've always been the strong one." After the lumpectomy, when Rebecca was still groggy from anesthesia, she overheard Mark talking to her sister Elaine in the hospital corridor. "I don't know if I can do this," he was saying, voice breaking. "Seeing her like this, she needs you now more than ever," Elaine said sharply. "This isn't about you." When Rebecca started chemo, the side effects hit hard and fast. Nausea that wouldn't quit. Fatigue that felt like concrete in her veins. Hair that came out in clumps until she asked Mark to shave it all off one grim Sunday morning. He'd done it without meeting her eyes in the bathroom mirror. His hands shaking so badly she'd feared he'd nick her scalp. "You're still beautiful," he said afterward, but he didn't touch the smooth dome of her head. That night, he slept on the couch, claiming he was worried about bumping her port. Mark started working late more often. software development emergencies, client dinners, weekend debugging sessions. Rebecca tried not to notice how he flinched when she vomited, how he found reasons to be out of the house during her worst days. "It's hard for him to see you suffer," Elaine said diplomatically during one of her daily visits. She'd taken to coming by after her teaching job, bringing meals, helping Rebecca bathe when the fatigue was overwhelming. "It's harder to be the one suffering," Rebecca replied, then immediately felt guilty. Mark was trying in his way. He kept the bills paid, the health insurance current. He researched clinical trials obsessively, forwarding her links at all hours. He just couldn't seem to be physically present. After her third chemo session, Rebecca's immune system crashed. A simple cold turned into pneumonia overnight. She woke gasping for breath at 3 a.m., burning with fever. "Hospital," she wheezed to Mark, who startled awake beside her, looking disoriented. The next week in the hospital was a blur. Antibiotics, oxygen, doctors with concerned faces. Through it all, Elaine was a constant presence, advocating fiercely with medical staff, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair by Rebecca's bed. Mark visited daily, always bringing something, magazines, a plant, her favorite lip balm, but never staying longer than an hour. "I should get back to work," he'd say, kissing her forehead chastely. "Rest and get better." When she was released, the oncologist recommended she recuperate somewhere with constant care before resuming chemo. "She can stay with me," Elaine offered immediately. "I've got the guest room all set up and I can work from home." Rebecca looked at Mark, hoping he'd insist she come home, that he'd take time off to care for her. Instead, she saw the flicker of relief cross his face before he composed himself. "That's probably best," he agreed. "Our place isn't great for recovery, all those stairs, and I've been so swamped at Axion lately with the new product launch." That night at Elaine's, after a dinner Rebecca could barely touch, her sister asked gently, "Are you and Mark okay?" Rebecca stared at the unfamiliar ceiling of Elaine's guest room. "He's never been good with illness. He'll be better once I'm stronger." Elaine made a non-committal sound. "You deserve someone who's there for the in-sickness part, too." 15 years of marriage isn't something you throw away because one partner struggles during a crisis, Rebecca said, the words feeling rehearsed even to her own ears. "One partner is having a crisis. The other is having a struggle," Elaine corrected sharply, then sighed. "I'm sorry. I'm being judgmental." "He's trying in his own way," Rebecca insisted. But as weeks at Elaine's turned into months, Mark's visits grew shorter and less frequent. His texts became perfunctory check-ins rather than conversations. Video calls were rushed and often interrupted by work emergencies. When Rebecca's hair began growing back, soft fuzz, darker than her previous light brown, Mark barely seemed to notice. When her oncologist finally declared her pneumonia resolved and her blood work strong enough to resume chemo, Mark sent flowers instead of coming to the appointment. "I think he's having an affair," Rebecca said abruptly one night, the thought she'd been suppressing for weeks finally escaping. Elaine froze in the act of folding laundry. "Why do you say that?" "He's never available anymore. Always has excuses not to video chat. I asked about his late nights at Axion and he got defensive." Rebecca twisted her wedding ring, now loose on her thinner finger. "And there's a new woman there, Vanessa something. He mentions her all the time, then acts weird if I ask questions." "That doesn't necessarily mean. My friend Jen works in HR at Axion. She said they seem close." "Too close." Elaine sat on the bed beside her. "What do you want to do?" Rebecca stared at her hands, pale and veined from months of illness. "I want to go home. Surprise him. See for myself." "Are you sure you're strong enough?" Elaine asked, concerned. "You have chemo again next week." "I need to know what I'm fighting for," Rebecca said simply. "Is it just my life or my marriage too?" The blonde woman, Vanessa, stared at Rebecca as if she were a ghost. "You can't call the police," she stammered, still clutching Rebecca's house key. "I have permission to be here." "From my husband, not from me," Rebecca replied, already dialing. "This is breaking and entering." "No, it's not. Mark gave me the key months ago. I water the plants when you're both away. Vanessa stopped, apparently realizing she was only making things worse. Rebecca paused, her finger hovering over the call button. How long? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you... How long? Each word was a cold, precise hammer blow. 3 months, Vanessa admitted. Since the Prescott project. But he told me you two were separated. He said you left him during your illness, that you were staying with your sister permanently. Rebecca's laugh was hollow. Separated? I have cancer. I've been recovering at my sister's because he claimed he couldn't take care of me. Vanessa's perfect features crumpled. Cancer? He said you had some kind of breakdown. That you couldn't handle the stress of his promotion and... She stopped, realization dawning. Oh my God. The nights he couldn't see me because he was visiting you in the hospital. You actually were in the hospital? Pneumonia. A complication of chemotherapy. Rebecca's voice was eerily calm, which he would have known if he'd stayed longer than 20 minutes during his obligatory visits. Vanessa's face had gone pale. I swear I had no idea. He told me... I don't care what he told you, Rebecca interrupted. You're in my house without my permission. Leave the key on the counter and get out, or I'm calling the police. Vanessa set the key down with shaking fingers. I'm so sorry. I never would have... Save it, Rebecca said coldly. Just go. After Vanessa left, Rebecca stood motionless in the kitchen, staring at the blue-tagged key. The house was unnervingly silent. She walked through each room slowly, cataloging the changes from her 6-month absence. New throw pillows on the couch. Wine glasses she didn't recognize in the cabinet. A different brand of coffee in the pantry. In the bathroom, unfamiliar makeup products tucked behind her own rarely used ones. And in the bedroom, a bottle of that floral perfume hidden at the back of her dresser drawer. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed. Their bed, where her husband had been sleeping with another woman, and finally let the tears come. Not delicate, romantic tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs that left her gasping and lightheaded. When the storm passed, she washed her face and looked at herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were hollower than before the cancer, her once shoulder-length hair now a soft, dark fuzz. Her eyes, though, they were harder than she remembered, clearer. She called Elaine. You were right, she said without preamble. He's been having an affair. She had a key to our house. Elaine swore viciously. Where are you now? Do you want me to come get you? No, I'm waiting for him to come home. Rebecca's voice was steady. But I need you to do something for me first. 2 hours later, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, a cup of now cold tea before her, when she heard Mark's key in the lock. He called out as he entered, his voice falsely cheerful. Becca? You here? Elaine called and said you wanted to surprise me by coming home early, but He stopped abruptly in the kitchen doorway. Rebecca knew what he was seeing. His wife, thinner and paler than he remembered, sitting calmly at their kitchen table. Next to her hand lay the blue-tagged key and a stack of papers Elaine had dropped off. Welcome home, Rebecca said quietly. We need to talk. Mark's expression cycled rapidly through shock, confusion, guilt, and finally settled on a careful neutral mask she'd come to know well during her diagnosis. You're home early, he said lamely. I would have picked you up, like you picked Vanessa up, brought her here, gave her my house key. Each question was delivered in the same level tone. Mark paled. I can explain. She already did. Very helpfully. Right after she walked into our house using the key you gave her while I was recovering from cancer. He took a step forward, hands outstretched. Becca, please. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Rebecca corrected him. You've been having an affair with your colleague for months, while I was fighting for my life. You gave her access to our home. You told her I had a breakdown and abandoned you, when in reality, you shipped me off to my sister's because you couldn't handle seeing me sick. That's not fair, Mark protested, voice cracking. I was trying to make sure you got the best care from someone else, Rebecca finished for him. Well, you what? Built a new life with Vanessa? Played house in our home? Mark sank into the chair across from her. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just so scared of losing you, and she was there, and you were scared of losing me, so you cheated on me? That's your explanation? Rebecca shook her head in disbelief. I spent 6 months fighting cancer, fighting to get back to our life, while you were busy replacing me. I wasn't replacing you, Mark insisted. It was just, I couldn't handle seeing you so sick, so different. I know that's selfish and weak, but yes, it is. Rebecca pushed the stack of papers toward him. These are divorce papers. Elaine had them drawn up weeks ago. She suspected before I did. Mark stared at the papers, then back at her, his handsome face crumpling. Don't do this, please. We can work through this. I'll end it with Vanessa. I'll do therapy, anything you want. I already did everything I could, Rebecca said. I fought through surgery, through chemo that made me so sick I wanted to die, through pneumonia that nearly killed me. I fought every day to come back to you, to us. Where were you fighting, Mark? In Vanessa's bed? That's not fair, he repeated weakly. You know what's not fair? Coming home to find another woman has been living in my house. Finding out my husband has been lying to everyone. To me, to her, probably to himself. Rebecca's voice finally cracked. I deserved better than that. I know, Mark whispered, tears streaming down his face. I know you did. But please give me another chance. Why? So you can abandon me again when things get tough? When the cancer comes back? His head snapped up. Is it back? Did they find something? The naked fear in his voice almost made her laugh. No, but it could come back someday. That's life with cancer. Constant vigilance, constant fear. Could you handle that, Mark? Really? Because you couldn't handle it the first time. He had no answer for that. Rebecca stood up, suddenly exhausted. I'm going to Elaine's to get my things. When I come back, I want your stuff out of our bedroom. You can sleep in the guest room until we figure out next steps. You're moving back in? Mark looked confused. This is my house too, Rebecca said firmly. I'm not the one who broke our vows. What about the police? He asked. Vanessa said you threatened to call them. Rebecca smiled thinly. I still might. 2 days later, Rebecca stood in her kitchen, watching rain streak the windows as she waited for the kettle to boil. She'd moved back in fully, her few belongings from Elaine's now restored to their proper places. Mark had relocated to the guest room without argument, walking around the house like a ghost, trying repeatedly to engage her in conversation about their future. She'd shut him down each time. I'm focusing on my health right now, she'd say. My next chemo session is Monday. It wasn't a lie. Her oncologist had been concerned about the stress of her marriage crisis affecting her treatment. Cancer feeds on stress, Dr. Chen had warned. Whatever you decide about your marriage, try to find calm in the decision. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Rebecca tensed. They weren't expecting anyone, and Mark was at the office, allegedly clearing out his personal items from Vanessa's workspace as part of his promises to make things right. Through the peephole, she saw 2 uniformed police officers. For a wild moment, she thought Mark had called them, claiming she was unstable or trespassing. Then she remembered she had been the one to mention police. She opened the door cautiously. Can I help you, Mrs. Armstrong? The female officer asked. I'm Officer Lopez, this is Officer Darrow. We need to speak with you and your husband regarding a report of unauthorized entry to your property. Rebecca's confusion must have shown on her face, because Officer Lopez continued, a Ms. Vanessa Taylor gave a statement yesterday claiming she had permission to enter your home but was threatened when she did so. She filed a complaint against me? Rebecca asked incredulously. Not exactly, ma'am. She wanted to clarify the situation for the record. Apparently, she's been harassed at her workplace about the incident. Rebecca invited them in, mind racing. As they sat in the living room, Officer Darrow explained further. Ms. Taylor stated that your husband gave her a key to your home without your knowledge or consent while you were away receiving medical treatment. She believed she had legitimate access until you confronted her. She wanted this documented in case of future issues. I did threaten to call the police when I found her in my house, Rebecca admitted. I had no idea who she was or why she had a key. That's completely understandable, Officer Lopez said. Is your husband available? We'd like to speak with him as well. He's at work, Rebecca said. I can call him. Mark arrived 30 minutes later, face ashen when he saw the police cruiser outside. When Officer Darrow explained why they were there, Mark looked like he might be sick. I did give Vanessa a key, he confirmed, not meeting Rebecca's eyes. My wife was staying with her sister while recovering from cancer treatment. I made a terrible mistake. Did Mrs. Armstrong authorize you to provide access to Ms. Taylor? Officer Lopez asked pointedly. No, Mark admitted. Becca had no idea. The officers exchanged glances. Mr. Armstrong, giving someone unauthorized access to your home without your spouse's consent could potentially constitute a form of domestic abuse, especially given Mrs. Armstrong's vulnerable medical condition. Mark blanched. I never meant. Intent doesn't always matter, Officer Darrow cut in. The effect is what counts. Your wife came home to find a stranger with access to her personal space during a serious illness. Am I going to be charged with something? Mark asked, voice cracking. That would be up to your wife, Officer Lopez said, turning to Rebecca. Mrs. Armstrong, do you wish to file a formal complaint against your husband? The room went silent. Mark stared at her, naked fear in his eyes. Rebecca thought about the months of isolation during her illness, the betrayal of finding another woman in her home, the violation of her safe space during her most vulnerable time. Not at this time, she finally said. The officers nodded and provided her with information about domestic violence resources and restraining orders just in case. They assured her the incident would remain on file and told Mark in no uncertain terms that his actions had been inappropriate and potentially criminal. After they left, Mark collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. Thank you, he whispered, for not pressing charges. I didn't do it for you, Rebecca said evenly. I did it for me. I don't need the stress of a court case on top of everything else. Mark looked up, eyes red-rimmed. I never thought of it as abuse, I swear. I just wasn't thinking clearly. That's been your problem all along, hasn't it? Rebecca said, suddenly bone-tired. You weren't thinking about me at all. I was terrified, he said, voice breaking. When you got sick, it was like watching my mother all over again. The hospitals, the chemo, your hair. I couldn't handle it. I know that's no excuse. No, it's not, Rebecca interrupted. Because guess what, Mark? I was terrified too. Every single day. Terrified the cancer would spread. Terrified the treatment wouldn't work. Terrified I'd die alone in my sister's guest room while my husband was screwing his colleague in our bed. Mark flinched as if she'd slapped him. I deserve that. You deserve a lot worse, Rebecca said coldly. Do you have any idea what it felt like? Coming home early to surprise you, only to find another woman had taken my place? Finding out you'd given her access to our home, the one place I should have felt safe, while I was fighting for my life? I can't even imagine, Mark whispered. If I could take it back. But you can't, Rebecca finished for him. You can't take back abandoning me when I needed you most. You can't take back lying to your mistress about me having a breakdown. You can't take back making me feel like a stranger in my own home. What can I do? He asked desperately. Please, Becca, I'll do anything. Rebecca looked at this man she'd loved for 15 years. This man who'd held her hand through job losses and family deaths, who'd danced with her in their kitchen on random Tuesday nights, who'd sworn to love her in sickness and in health but failed when it mattered most. You can give me space, she said finally. Real space. Not abandonment disguised as care. I need to focus on getting through my last 3 chemo sessions. On healing. On figuring out who I am now. Because cancer changes you, Mark. It changes everything. Are you saying there's a chance for us? Rebecca shook her head slowly. I'm saying I don't know yet. What I do know is that I deserve better than what you gave me. I deserve someone who won't run when things get hard. I want to be that person, Mark said earnestly. I want to prove I can be there for you. Words are easy, Rebecca replied. But I need actions. And time. What about the divorce papers? They'll wait, Rebecca said. For now. 6 months later, Rebecca sat in Dr. Chen's office, her now cropped dark hair neatly styled, wearing a blue dress she'd bought specifically for this appointment. The final scan results. No evidence of disease, Dr. Chen said, smiling broadly. You're officially in remission. Elaine, sitting beside her, burst into tears of joy, squeezing Rebecca's hand so tightly it hurt. What happens now? Rebecca asked, her own eyes wet. Now you heal, Dr. Chen said. Physically, emotionally, you'll have checkups every 3 months for the first year, then every 6 months. You'll stay on hormone therapy. But essentially, you've done it, Rebecca. You've climbed the mountain. Outside in the parking lot, Elaine hugged her fiercely. I'm so proud of you, sis. So damn proud. I couldn't have done it without you, Rebecca said honestly. Yes, you could have, Elaine replied. But I'm glad you didn't have to. That night, Rebecca stood in her kitchen in her new apartment overlooking the park, cooking dinner for her small remission celebration. The divorce had been finalized a month earlier, quiet and relatively amicable. Mark had given her a generous settlement without argument and helped her find the apartment when she'd decided she couldn't stay in their house, with all its tainted memories. The doorbell rang. Rebecca wiped her hands and went to answer, finding Mark standing there with a gift bag and a tentative smile. Still okay if I join? He asked. Of course, she said, stepping back to let him in. They weren't friends, not exactly, but they weren't enemies either. They'd found a careful peace during her last months of treatment. Mark had attended her final chemo sessions, sitting quietly beside Elaine in the infusion suite, bringing ginger candies for her nausea and audiobooks for the long hours. He hadn't asked to reconcile again, hadn't pushed for another chance. Instead, he'd started therapy. For me, not for us, he'd clarified, and volunteered with a cancer support organization, driving patients to appointments when family couldn't. Small steps. Genuine ones. You look amazing, he said now, taking in her healthy color, her stylish haircut. Remission suits you. Thanks, Rebecca said, accepting the gift bag. Inside was a small crystal sun catcher, designed to spread rainbows across a room when light hit it. For your new beginning, he explained. I thought your new place could use some color. Elaine arrived shortly after, bringing wine and her new boyfriend Thomas, a soft-spoken librarian she'd met at a school event. Rebecca's friend Jen came too, along with several friends from her cancer support group. As they toasted her remission, Rebecca looked around at this makeshift family who'd held her through the darkest year of her life. Mark caught her eye from across the room and raised his glass slightly, an acknowledgement of all they'd lost and all they'd learned. Later, as guests were leaving, Mark lingered. I wanted to tell you, he said quietly. I've accepted that transfer to the Seattle office. I leave next month, Rebecca nodded. She'd suspected he might take the opportunity when he'd mentioned it weeks ago. A fresh start might be good, she said. For both of us, he agreed. Becca, He paused, searching for words. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough when you needed me to be. I know, she said simply. And I'm sorry it took losing you to learn how to be better. Rebecca touched his arm lightly. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. After he left, Rebecca stood on her small balcony, looking at the city lights. A year ago, she'd been fighting for her life in multiple ways. Against cancer, against betrayal, against the collapse of everything she'd thought was solid. She'd lost some battles. Her marriage, her home, parts of her body that could never be replaced. But she'd won the war. She was still here, stronger than before, clearer about what she deserved. The key to her new apartment hung on a blue rubber identifier, not because her memory was foggy from chemo now, but because some habits were worth keeping. A reminder of how far she'd come, a reminder that sometimes the key to healing is knowing which doors to lock and which to open.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.